Welcome to the fourth and final part of Halfdan the Black Saga. Today I'll be reading my translations of the two final chapters in Halfdan the Black's saga, which is the first of the VIKING SAGAs proper in Heimskringla. And we'll be reading about the disappearance of Halfdan's food as well as his death. And before I start reading, I want to remind you that going along with my translation of Heimskringla, I'm making a complete genealogy, incorporating all the names in Heimskringla, so quite a comprehensive thing and really a really nice material to have when you read Heimskringla, because going along there are a lot of names, a lot of family relations, so it's much easier to understand conflicts, marriages and all these things between different bloodlines. I'm sticking very strictly to Snorre's own. I'm not cross-referencing with other genealogies. And that's just to know that when people look at my genealogy from Heimskringla, it's actually the genealogy that is in Heimskringla, warts and all. And then you can cross-reference it to your own, making it more precise or wherever, where there would be inconsistencies. Anyway, this time it's Halfdan the Black Saga, so let's get to it. The disappearance of Halfdan's food. King Halfdan was in Hadeland during Jul. And I'm using the English word Jul because in Scandinavian countries then and now Christmas is still called Jul, which of course is the pagan term for Christmas. And since there's an English equivalent, I'm just using that. And especially during Halfdan the Black's time, it makes no sense to call it Christmas, as at that time there were very, very few Christian nobility in Norway at that time. When King Halfdan is in Hadeland here, it's most likely that he's in what is today not called Hadeland, but Toten and up in those areas, which at that time were part of the areas called Hadeland. King Halfdan was in Hadeland during Jul. Something strange happened there on the eve of Jul. When the men had sat down at the table, and there were many people there, all the food and ale vanished from the table. The king stayed seated in an angry mood, while all the others went each to their own. In order for the king to find out the truth of this situation, he had a Finn brought in, a knowledgeable one, and wanted to force him to tell the truth. And Finn here is most likely a Sami, as they were called Finns also. He tortured him but got nothing out of him. The Finn begged Harald, his son, for help, and Harald asked them to show him mercy, but none was given. This is the future Harald find here. Harald then arranged for his escape against the king's will, and followed himself. They traveled to a place where a chieftain held a large feast, and they seemed to be well received there. When they had stayed until spring, there was one day when the chieftain said to Harald, "Your father thought it a great loss that I stole a little from him this winter, but I will now pay you back with good news. Your father is dead, and you should go home where you will receive all the lands that your father held, and in addition, you will win all of Norway." Halfdan the Black's death. Halfdan the Black left the feast in Hadeland, and the path he took was such that he would cross the lake of Rand. This was in the spring, and the sun was melting the snow. So most likely he was in what is today the Toten area, which was part of Hadeland at that time, even though today we don't call this area Hadeland. So probably east of Einafjord, or somewhere around Einafjord. I would think maybe against Lake Mjøsa, so eastern Toten up by Lake Mjøsa. These farms around Kapp, Lena, Hov, which were rich areas at that time. Anyway, he would have crossed over from Eina to over the mountain to Brandbu. When they passed Rykingsvik, there had been a drinking hole in the ice during the winter, so the cattle could drink. And they had left cow dung there, and this had melted around the hole under the sunshine. So when the king came there, the ice broke, and King Halfdan drowned there with many of his men. And this for me is one of the episodes that quite clearly gives a testament to that what they include in the sagas is not only flattering. King Halfdan goes through the ice because the cow dung left on the ice. As people who have lived in winter areas know, if you have like anything black or dark on snow or ice and the sun hits it, it heats up and it melts through the snow. And this had happened on the ice outside Rykingsvik, which is right close to what is today called Brandbu. Today it's called Rykingsvik. So the cow dung, it's a very mundane way to die. It's not very glamorous. So he crashes through a patch of cow dung and drowns in the Randsfjord. And they include it like this. They don't dress it up or anything, which I think goes quite a way to show that whatever is included in sagas, of course, is not 100% precise the whole time, but the general gist, the general stories, they aren't dressed up or fancy. Halfdan the Black, when he wants to dream, he goes and sleeps in the pigsty. When he goes through the ice, they clearly say it's because of the cow dung. It's not because of some great battle or someone left a trap or anything. It's just a stupid coincidence, and they keep it like that. So I think this episode gives quite a bit of credibility. This isn't just a simple king. It's the first king that Snorri chooses to write a singular saga about. Like all the kings before have been in the compilation of Ynglinga Saga. So this is an important king, and he dies such an unglamorous death. He was 40 years of age. He was the most loved of all kings. So much was he loved that when it was heard that he had died and his body had been moved to Ringerike and was to be buried there, nobility from Raumarike, Vestfold and Hedmark all went there and asked for the body to be brought to their kingdoms and buried there. And they thought this would give them good years to come. So they settled it thus, that the body was divided in 4 parts, and the head was mounded at Stein in Ringerike. And they all took home their own part and mounded them, and these are called Halfdan's mounds. So the body was split in several parts and mounded in Ringerike, Raumarike, Vestfold and Hedmark. The only secure mound today, which is still called Halfdan's Haug or Halfdan's mound, is the one in Ringerike by Stein farm. Even though there's been some dating which says that parts of this mound are probably a bit older than Halfdan the Black's mound. But it's a very large mound. It's the mound that's on the graphics of my reading here of the saga, so it's quite a large mound. So I would say maybe I'll check up on it, because if it's a name that has followed for hundreds of years, then I would lean towards it actually being Halfdan's Haug. But if it's been named kind of with the resurgence of the interest in sagas in the 19th century, late 1800 years, then I would probably not trust it so much. Anyway, that was Halfdan the Black saga. So Halfdan the Black comes in and establishes, kind of re-establishes Halfdan Whiteleg's kingdom in eastern Norway, adds Agder and Sognefjorden to it. So he has laid claim to very large parts of Norway. The areas of southern Norway that he doesn't control are, of course, the very powerful base up in Nidaros, Trondheim, Møre, the Møre areas, which at that time were also powerful areas. Rollo quite likely came out of there. And also the areas around Ryfylke and Hordaland, which again are large, powerful areas. And of course adding Alfheim or Ranarike, which go down south approximately to modern-day Gothenburg, and on the west side of the Göta Elv, the river going up from Gothenburg to the large lake Vänern. That was that. If you have any comments or anything, please, or questions, anything you disagree with, leave a comment, I'll answer them. And if you enjoyed the content, please subscribe. Now I'm starting on one of the larger sagas, more detailed, and where things get, we get more, rich descriptions, and that's Haraldfinnr saga. The first king of his line to consolidate Norway, and the first king in historical times that consolidates all of Norway. Even though, like I've mentioned many times before in Ynglinga Saga and in other legendary sagas, there are mentioned several kings that held sway over the Norwegian areas, and even had large, like Ivar Vidfamne, who, according to the legendary sagas, held large parts of Denmark, large parts of Sweden and Norway, and also Baltic areas. So in legendary times there were also great kings. But this is the first in what we call historical times. What is generally called historical times. But I think it's quite clear that before that there were other large power bases. Also, if you look at the artifacts going all the way back to Bronze Age, you find signs that you have had quite large power bases that have had consolidated power over large tracts of Northern Europe and Scandinavia. And of course you can read about them in the legends. So, hope you join me for the next video.